My name is Arlo, 32, a software developer who saved for years to buy my $660,000 downtown Seattle condo. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, while my sister Heather basked in the golden child spotlight. Last Christmas, I overheard a conversation that shattered my world. My parents plotting to move Heather's family into my home. Instead of exploding, I smiled and set a trap they walked right into. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my family's betrayal, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button for more stories of family justice served ice cold. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, where my parents, Daniel and Elizabeth, raised my sister Heather and me in a comfortable 3-bedroom ranch house. From an early age, I demonstrated a strong work ethic that contrasted sharply with my sister's carefree attitude. At 15, I landed my first job bagging groceries at the local supermarket, saving every penny while my friends blew their money on video games and fast food. By 17, I had enough saved to buy my first car, a used Honda that wasn't pretty but got me where I needed to go. My academic focus matched my financial discipline. I graduated top of my class and earned a full scholarship to the University of Washington's computer science program. Those college years were a grinding marathon of all-nighters, ramen noodles, and juggling part-time jobs. I worked as a library assistant, pizza delivery driver, and eventually landed a coveted internship at a tech startup during my junior year. After graduation, I secured a position at a prestigious tech company, where I quickly established myself as a dedicated team player willing to take on the projects others avoided. For 5 years, I lived in a tiny studio apartment, bringing lunch from home, skipping vacations, and putting away over 40% of my income toward my dream, owning property in one of Seattle's most desirable neighborhoods. The day I got the keys to my $660,000 condo was the proudest moment of my life. 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, and a view of Puget Sound that took my breath away every morning. I did this entirely on my own, without a penny of family assistance. Every square inch represented countless hours of hard work and sacrifice. My sister Heather's life took a dramatically different path. 3 years younger than me, she was the family darling from day one. With her naturally outgoing personality and athletic prowess, she effortlessly commanded attention at family gatherings, while I faded into the background with my books. Heather breezed through high school on her looks and charm rather than academic effort. When she announced her acceptance to an expensive private college, our parents immediately committed to covering her full tuition. The same parents who had congratulated me on my scholarship with comments like, "Good thing you got that scholarship. College is so expensive these days." 2 years into her art history degree, Heather met Troy, a business administration major with big talk and little follow-through. Within 6 months, she dropped out to follow Troy to his hometown. By 25, she had 2 children, Emma, now 7, and Liam, 5, and a history of financial disasters that my parents constantly scrambled to fix. Credit card debt? Mom and Dad paid it off. Car repossessed? They bought her a new one. Rent late again? They covered it, no questions asked. Meanwhile, during my college years, when my laptop died right before finals, I worked extra shifts to replace it rather than asking for help. The disparity in our parents' treatment became a painful backdrop to our adult relationship. They celebrated Heather's minor achievements, completing a 1-week photography course or selling a single painting at a community fair, with enthusiastic social media posts and family dinners. When I received a major innovation award at work, my mother's response was, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Heather's thinking about starting an Etsy shop?" The pattern continued through our 20s and into our 30s. Heather and Troy moved between apartments, always living slightly beyond their means, with my parents providing a financial safety net that they never offered me. Not that I needed it anymore, my career was thriving, and my investments were growing steadily. What I couldn't understand was why my parents continued enabling Heather's irresponsibility, especially as their own retirement accounts dwindled. Dad had worked as a high school history teacher, and Mom as a nurse. They had modest pensions, but their constant bailouts of Heather left them financially vulnerable. I once gently suggested they consider their own future security, only to be told, "Family takes care of family, Arlo. You wouldn't understand because you've always been so independent." The subtext was clear. My independence was not a virtue, but a character flaw that prevented me from understanding family loyalty. When I purchased my condo, their reaction was tepid at best. "It's just a condo, Arlo. Not like you're raising a family there," my father commented, skillfully diminishing my achievement while reminding me of my single status. My mother added, "It seems so extravagant for just one person, as if I should feel guilty for my success." The first and only time Heather visited my new home, her jealousy was palpable. She ran her fingers over my quartz countertops, commenting on how lucky I was. Troy spent the entire visit pointing out improvements he would make, while their children treated my carefully curated furniture as a playground. After they left, I spent 3 hours cleaning sticky fingerprints off surfaces and fixing a lamp they had broken. When my parents called in November to insist on hosting Christmas at my place, I initially refused. My condo was my sanctuary, not a venue for family gatherings that inevitably left me feeling diminished. But they persisted, playing on my guilt with comments about family traditions and how the children deserved to experience a real Seattle Christmas. Eventually, I relented, hoping foolishly that this might finally be the occasion where my achievements received proper acknowledgement. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. Heather's unusual enthusiasm about visiting. My father's detailed questions about parking regulations and visitor policies in my building. My mother asking if I had an air mattress or sofa bed just in case. But I was so accustomed to subordinating my instincts to family expectations that I ignored the alarm bells ringing in my head. I spent weeks preparing for their arrival, deep cleaning every corner, stocking the fridge with everyone's favorites, and even buying a larger dining table to accommodate us all. I decorated a real pine tree with elegant glass ornaments, hung stockings with each family member's name, and spent hundreds on thoughtfully chosen gifts. Little did I know, I was setting the stage for the greatest betrayal of my life. My family arrived on Christmas Eve afternoon with an amount of luggage that immediately struck me as excessive. My parents brought 3 large suitcases for what was supposed to be a 3-day stay. Heather, Troy, and the kids had even more 5 suitcases, plus toys, plus what looked like a box of framed photos and household items. "Planning to move in?" I joked as I helped them unload the car. My father laughed a bit too loudly. "You know how it is with kids. They need so much stuff." Within minutes of arrival, I noticed my mother scrutinizing the layout of my living room, measuring spaces with her eyes and making small comments about furniture placement. "This couch would work better against that wall, don't you think?" Troy, meanwhile, wasn't even trying to be subtle. While I was in the kitchen preparing snacks, I caught him using an actual tape measure on my guest bedroom walls. When he saw me watching, he quickly pocketed it with a mumbled excuse about just curious about the dimensions. The children were uncharacteristically well behaved, speaking in whispers and carefully touching things only after looking to Heather for permission. This was a dramatic departure from their usual hurricane-like energy. It was almost as if they'd been coached to make a good impression. Dinner that evening was a strange affair. Conversation felt forced, with unusual gaps and significant glances exchanged between my parents and Heather. They asked pointed questions about my neighbors, the condo association rules, and whether I had plans to upgrade to a real house someday. I went to bed that night with an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach. Something was definitely off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what they were planning. Around midnight, I got up to get a glass of water from the kitchen. As I approached the hallway, I heard my parents' and sister's voices coming from the living room. They were speaking in hushed tones, clearly not wanting to wake me. I stopped just around the corner, hidden from view but able to hear every word. Arlo can afford another place. Heather needs stability for the kids, my father was saying emphatically. My mother's voice came next, pragmatic and scheming. We just need to convince him to let you stay temporarily while you're between apartments. Once you're in, it'll be harder for him to ask you to leave. The schools in this district are so much better, Heather added. I already looked into enrollment for Emma and Liam. Troy's voice had a smug quality that made my blood run cold. I measured the master bedroom. Our king bed will fit perfectly once we get rid of his furniture. He's being selfish living alone in a 2-bedroom anyway, my mother said. What does he need all this space for? You have a family. We've already given notice on our apartment, Heather admitted. The landlord was being totally unreasonable about the noise complaints. My father sounded confident. Arlo has a duty to support family. We've always taught him that family comes first. He'll come around to the idea, and if not, well, sometimes it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. They laughed softly, and I heard the clink of wine glasses in a toast. I stood frozen in the hallway, my water forgotten as shock coursed through my system. My own family was plotting to basically steal my home from under me, the place I'd worked so hard for, the sanctuary I'd created for myself. They discussed me as if I were an obstacle to be managed, not a person with rights to my own property. I quietly returned to my bedroom, my heart hammering in my chest. I felt physically ill, nauseous, and lightheaded, with a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead. Sleep was impossible, as my mind raced through what I'd just heard, trying to process the depth of this betrayal. All night I oscillated between rage and disbelief. I considered storming into the living room and confronting them immediately. I thought about packing their bags and throwing them out into the cold December night. I contemplated calling the police, but as dawn approached, a different approach crystallized in my mind, a strategic response that would teach them a lesson they'd never forget. They wanted to take advantage of me yet again? Fine. I would appear to let them, right before pulling the rug out from under their entitled feet. Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow dusting the Seattle skyline. I emerged from my bedroom with a convincing smile, showing no sign of my sleepless night or my knowledge of their scheme. "Merry Christmas, everyone," I announced cheerfully, distributing coffee and hot chocolate to my family gathered around the tree. I watched them exchange glances, clearly interpreting my good mood as a positive sign for their plans. I maintained the charade through gift opening, exclaiming over the token presents they'd brought me a generic sweater from my parents, a handmade card from the kids, nothing from Heather and Troy. In contrast, I'd spent weeks selecting thoughtful gifts for each of them. Designer handbag for Heather, expensive golf clubs for Troy, iPad for my father, spa package for my mother, and carefully researched educational toys for the children. Their effusive thanks felt hollow now that I knew their true intentions. I spent hours preparing a traditional Christmas feast: prime rib roast, Yorkshire pudding, roasted vegetables, and homemade apple pie. As we gathered around my dining table, I noted how they casually discussed which chairs they preferred, as if mentally assigning permanent seating arrangements. Throughout the meal, I strategically dropped comments about how much I loved my condo and neighborhood. "I can't imagine ever leaving this place," I said, watching their expressions carefully. "It's absolutely perfect for me." After the main course but before dessert, my mother cleared her throat significantly. "Arlo, honey, we have something we need to discuss with you." My father jumped in. "It's about Heather and Troy's housing situation." I feigned innocence. "Oh? What's going on?" Heather's eyes filled with practiced tears. "Our landlord is selling the building. We have to be out by January 15th. Troy added his part to the performance. "I've had some setbacks at work. The economy, you know. And with the kids in school, stability is so important right now." My mother reached over to pat my hand. "We were thinking, since you have this lovely spare bedroom that you hardly use, just temporarily," my father added quickly, "until they get back on their feet." I watched their orchestrated performance with a mixture of disgust and fascination. They had clearly rehearsed this, probably multiple times, confident in their ability to manipulate me as they always had. I looked down at my plate, making a show of considering their request. I could feel the tension around the table as they waited for my response. Finally, I looked up with a carefully crafted expression of reluctant acceptance. "I suppose, just until you find a new place?" The relief around the table was palpable. Heather actually clapped her hands together. "Oh, Arlo, you're a lifesaver. Family helps family," my mother said approvingly, as if I'd finally learned an important lesson. My father raised his wine glass to Arlo's generosity. As they clinked glasses, celebrating their successful manipulation, I smiled and joined the toast. But inside, I was already forming a plan that would turn their victory to ashes. The morning after Christmas, while my family was still sleeping, I slipped out for what I told them was a coffee run. Instead, I drove to a quiet cafe across town and called Jessica, my realtor friend, who had helped me purchase the condo 2 years earlier. "Jessica, I need to sell my place. Fast and discreetly." After explaining the situation, Jessica was appropriately outraged on my behalf. "Your own family. That's unbelievable." She quickly shifted to professional mode, outlining options. "Your condo has appreciated significantly since you bought it. In today's market, we could list it for $780,000, maybe higher." "I don't want to list it publicly," I explained. "They'd see it online. I need a private sale." Jessica thought for a moment. "I have a client who just lost out on a bidding war for a similar unit in your building. Cash buyer, looking to close quickly. Let me make a call." While she reached out to the potential buyer, I contacted my attorney, Marcus. His reaction mirrored Jessica's, but he provided the legal guidance I needed. "Document everything," he advised. "Take photos of every room before they move anything in. Forward me any texts or emails where they discuss moving in. And whatever you do, don't sign anything giving them permission to stay." I spent the next hour creating a detailed inventory of my possessions, taking time-stamped photos of each room, and forwarding the pictures to both Jessica and Marcus. I also recorded a video walkthrough of the entire condo, narrating the condition of floors, walls, and fixtures. By the time I returned home with coffee and pastries for everyone, I had the beginnings of a solid exit strategy. Over breakfast, I casually mentioned that I had an unexpected work assignment that would take me overseas for most of January. "Really?" My mother's eyes lit up at this fortuitous development. "What perfect timing. Heather and Troy can move in while you're gone and get settled." "That would be helpful," I agreed, watching Troy and my father exchange triumphant glances. "I'll move some of my personal stuff to storage to make room for you guys." Heather could barely contain her excitement. "The kids can pick their bedrooms today. Liam has always wanted a room with a view." I nodded, thinking that Liam had never even seen my condo before this visit. "Take the master bedroom," I offered magnanimously. "It has the best view and the most closet space." My mother beamed at me. "You're being so mature about this, Arlo. I'm proud of you." That afternoon, I suggested we walk around the neighborhood so I could show them the best local spots. "There's an excellent elementary school just 3 blocks away," I mentioned, watching Heather and Troy exchange meaningful looks. "We should check it out," Troy said too quickly. "For when if we end up staying in this area longer term. I have a good relationship with the principal." I lied smoothly. I could put in a good word for Emma and Liam. As we passed the building's amenities, the fitness center, community room, and rooftop garden, I encouraged them to consider these spaces their own. The garden has plots available for residents. "Heather, you always said you wanted to try growing vegetables." I was laying the bait, and they were devouring it without question, too blinded by their good fortune to wonder why I'd suddenly become so accommodating. Back at the condo, I created a document that appeared to be a list of helpful information, maintenance contact, garbage collection days, best delivery restaurants. but was actually designed to collect evidence of their intentions. "Could you add any other contacts you might need while staying here?" I asked innocently. "Schools you're considering, moving companies, that sort of thing." They eagerly filled the document with precisely the kind of information that would prove their intent to permanently move in rather than temporarily stay. Troy even added his new workplace address, though he'd told me earlier he was between jobs. That evening, I excused myself to pack for my trip and made several crucial phone calls from my bedroom. Jessica had miraculous news. Her cash buyer was interested and could close in 10 days if we moved quickly. Marcus had drafted a power of attorney so Jessica could complete the sale in my absence, and I had secured a furnished apartment across town, leased through an LLC that couldn't be traced back to me. Over the next few days, I systematically moved important documents, irreplaceable mementos, and valuable electronics to my new apartment and a storage unit, claiming I was creating space for my family. They were so focused on moving in that they didn't notice how much I was moving out. Their sense of entitlement grew hourly. Heather began rearranging my furniture without asking, declaring my minimalist aesthetic too cold for children. Troy invited his friend Douglas over to discuss renovation ideas for what he was already calling our place. I overheard him describing plans to knock out a wall between the living room and dining area. My parents brought over boxes of family photos and heirlooms, suggesting places where these would look nice. My mother had already selected paint swatches for the guest bathroom, which she felt needed warming up. One evening, I returned from an errand to find they had changed my Wi-Fi password. When I asked about it, Heather shrugged. The kids kept forgetting the old one, so we picked something easier for them. The final straw came when I discovered a social media post by Heather showcasing our new downtown home with a video tour of my condo, focusing on views from her master bedroom and plans for converting my home office into a creative space for the children. The night before my supposed departure for my international work trip, I prepared a special dinner. I opened expensive wine, made heartfelt toasts, and played the role of gracious brother and son to perfection. "I'm glad my home can be a haven for you guys," I said, raising my glass. "Family is so important." They agreed enthusiastically, too caught up in their victory to notice the cold calculation behind my smile. After dinner, I provided them with a set of keys. I'd had specially made keys that would become useless within days. I showed Troy how to operate the thermostat, explained to Heather which plants needed watering, and gave my parents a list of reliable maintenance contacts. As I packed my suitcase for my trip, I carefully selected items that were either replaceable or things I had already duplicated at my new apartment. The truly important items were already safely relocated. That night, lying in my bed for the last time, I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for the family relationships that were about to be permanently altered, anger at their willingness to take advantage of me yet again, but mostly a steely resolve to finally stand up for myself after a lifetime of being the family doormat. The next morning, I hugged everyone goodbye, assured them I'd be in touch despite the time difference, and wheeled my suitcase out the door. I drove away from my building in full view of my family, who waved from the balcony, my balcony already discussing what furniture to move first. Instead of heading to the airport, I drove straight to my new apartment. From there, I would orchestrate the final act of my counterplan and watch as their house of cards collapsed spectacularly. My new temporary apartment was nothing special, a furnished one-bedroom in an anonymous high-rise across town, but it offered something priceless: security and privacy. The building required key fob access, and I'd registered under my LLC name rather than my own. No one from my family would find me here. After settling in, I set up my laptop and logged into the security camera feed I discreetly installed in my condo before leaving. The small cameras, hidden in potted plants and bookshelves, gave me a clear view of the living room, kitchen, and hallway. I didn't have to wait long for the show to begin. Within 2 hours of my departure, a moving truck arrived. I watched as Troy directed burly movers carrying their furniture into my home. My parents helped unpack boxes in the kitchen, replacing my carefully selected cookware with Heather's mismatched pots and pans. The children ran excitedly from room to room, already treating the space as their own. Should we put Arlo's stuff in storage? I heard Troy ask my father. Let's wait a bit, my father replied. Make it seem like we're just temporarily sharing space. We can gradually move his things out over the next few months. I took screenshots of the video feed and forwarded them to Marcus, along with the audio clips. More evidence for our file, I texted. Over the next few days, I watched through the cameras as my family completely took over. Heather removed my artwork from the walls, replacing it with her amateur paintings and the children's school projects. Troy rearranged the living room, pushing my custom sofa against a wall to make room for his oversized leather recliner. My mother emptied my closets, packing my remaining clothes into boxes that were stacked in a corner of the guest room, which was now Liam's space. The transformation was thorough and swift. By day 3, you would hardly know I had ever lived there. Even my refrigerator magnets had been replaced with their family photos and children's artwork. Heather posted daily updates on social media, each more entitled than the last. Settling into our gorgeous new home, read one caption beneath a photo of Troy grilling on my balcony. Finally, in a neighborhood with good schools, declared another, featuring Emma and Liam in their new winter coats against the backdrop of my living room. On day 5, they hosted what Heather described online as a housewarming gathering. I watched as their friends toured my condo, admiring the view and high-end fixtures that I had saved for years to afford. Troy played bartender with my liquor collection, and Heather served appetizers on my serving platters. We got so lucky with this place, I heard her tell a friend. It's perfect for us, and Arlo hardly used the space anyway. Meanwhile, the real estate transaction was proceeding at lightning speed. Jessica had secured a full-price offer from her cash buyer, a tech executive relocating from California who was thrilled to avoid a bidding war. The inspection was waived, the paperwork expedited, and the closing date set for just 10 days after I left town. Marcus handled the legal aspects with impressive efficiency. Since I had never given my family a lease or formal permission to occupy the property, they had no legal tenant rights. The new owner could take possession immediately upon closing, and any occupants would be considered trespassers. Are you sure about this? Jessica asked during our final call before closing. It's going to be messy. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied. They've taken advantage of me for the last time. On the morning of the 10th day, closing day, I watched through the security cameras as my family went about their normal routine, blissfully unaware of what was about to happen. Heather was planning a dinner party for the weekend. Troy was measuring the master bathroom for a renovation. The children had been enrolled in the neighborhood school and were excited about starting the following week. At precisely 11 o'clock, the doorbell rang. On the security feed, I watched as Troy answered the door to find Marcus, accompanied by the new owner, Karen, and a uniformed security officer from the building management. "Can I help you?" Troy asked, confusion evident in his voice. Marcus stepped forward, handing Troy a thick envelope. "I'm Marcus Winters, attorney. This property has been sold. The new owner is taking possession today. You are currently occupying private property without permission and must vacate immediately." Troy's face contorted in disbelief. "What the hell are you talking about? This is our home. My brother-in-law Arlo. Mr. Hamilton no longer owns this property," Marcus interrupted smoothly. "The sale was completed this morning. All his rights and interests have been transferred to Miss Karen Jenkins here." Karen stepped forward, keys in hand. "I'm sorry for the confusion, but I'll be moving in this afternoon." The security officer added, "Building management has been notified of the ownership change. If you need assistance gathering your belongings, we can provide boxes." Troy's face flushed red. This is some kind of mistake. Arlo said we could stay here. According to our records, No formal agreement was ever signed, Marcus replied. You have 3 hours to collect essential items. The rest can be moved out over the next 48 hours, with scheduled access through building security. Troy slammed the door in their faces and immediately pulled out his phone. I switched to the kitchen camera feed to watch as he frantically explained the situation to Heather and my parents, who had been preparing lunch. The meltdown was spectacular. Heather collapsed into a chair, sobbing hysterically. My father paced the room, repeatedly calling my cell phone, which I had turned off after leaving a brief, automated message stating I was out of the country with limited connectivity. My mother tried my work number, then my email, then started calling mutual friends, none of whom knew anything about my actual whereabouts. By afternoon, I had 45 missed calls, 23 voicemails, and 38 text messages ranging from confused to pleading to threatening. You can't do this to us, Heather texted. Where are we supposed to go? Answer your damn phone, Troy wrote. We'll sue you for this. My father's message was particularly telling. Son, I don't know what kind of misunderstanding has happened, but we had an agreement. You said we could stay here. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded the threatening messages to Marcus, who added them to our documentation. By late afternoon, building security had to intervene as my family refused to leave. I watched through the cameras as officers escorted them from the premises, allowing them to take only overnight necessities. Heather was crying. The children were confused, and Troy was making loud threats about legal action. My parents looked shell-shocked, as if they couldn't comprehend how their perfect plan had backfired so catastrophically. As they were let out, I caught my mother's broken whisper to my father. How could Arlo do this to family? The irony of that statement was not lost on me. The next day, as arranged with the new owner, my family was permitted to return with movers to collect their belongings. The process was supervised by building security to ensure they took only their own items. I watched remotely as they sullenly packed up, their dream of claiming my home in tatters. By evening, the condo was empty except for my furniture and the items I had chosen to leave behind. Karen, the new owner, did a final walkthrough with her designer, already planning the renovations that would make the space truly hers. I sent her a congratulatory bouquet with a note thanking her for the smooth transaction. It was the final punctuation mark on a chapter of my life that was now firmly closed. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, free from the weight of familial obligation and the constant expectation that I should sacrifice my needs for others. The storm of messages continued angry, hurt, confused, but I let them crash against the wall of my silence. They had never truly respected my boundaries. Now they were learning that those boundaries were real, and the consequences for crossing them were severe. The fallout was immediate and intense. My phone continued to explode with notifications, missed calls reaching into triple digits within the first week. The voicemails evolved from confused. Arlo, there must be some mistake. To angry, how could you do this to your own family? To desperate, please, we have nowhere to go. Text messages poured in from not just my immediate family, but extended relatives who had been enlisted in the campaign to reach me. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly messaged, asking if I was okay, clearly fishing for information on my whereabouts. My parents even contacted my college roommate, who called me concerned that I'd gone missing. I maintained radio silence with my immediate family, but sent brief messages to extended relatives and friends, assuring them I was fine but needed space from certain family members who had betrayed my trust. This strategic communication prevented any actual missing person reports, while making it clear this was an intentional separation. Heather's social media transformation was particularly dramatic. Her account switched from showcasing our beautiful new downtown home to a public pity party, posts about the sudden family emergency and being temporarily between homes garnered sympathy from her followers. Eventually, she escalated to direct accusations. When family betrays you, without warning accompanied by tearful selfies, The digital smear campaign expanded as she shared carefully edited versions of the story, painting herself as the victim of a cruel brother who had promised them a home, then sold it out from under them without warning. She conveniently omitted the fact that they had planned to gradually push me out of my own property. My parents attempted a different approach, sending lengthy emails filled with guilt and emotional manipulation. "We raised you better than this," wrote my mother. "After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" My father's messages emphasized my duty to family and how I had always been selfish, but never cruel until now. Troy's communications were more direct threats of legal action for promised housing and verbal contracts. Marcus assured me these had no merit, especially given the evidence we had collected of their true intentions. While most of the family rallied against me, I received a surprising message 2 weeks after the incident from my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother. "Arlo, I don't know exactly what happened between you and your parents, but I want you to know I'm here if you need to talk. Family patterns can be toxic, and sometimes distance is the healthiest choice. Take care of yourself, nephew." This small expression of support opened a channel to parts of the family I hadn't expected. A week later, my Aunt Catherine, my mother's sister, reached out with even more insight. "Your mother called me crying about what you did," she wrote. "But when I pressed for details, the story kept changing. This isn't the first time your parents have enabled Heather at someone else's expense. They did the same to me years ago. Call me if you want to compare notes." Over coffee the following week, Catherine revealed how my parents had pressured her to let Heather and Troy stay in her vacation cabin for a weekend 5 years earlier, which turned into a 3-month occupation that left the property damaged and Catherine with unpaid utility bills. "They've always had blind spots where Heather is concerned," Catherine explained. "I love my sister, but her parenting has created this situation, not you." These conversations helped me understand that the family dysfunction went deeper and had more history than I'd realized. Far from being an isolated incident, the condo scheme was part of a generational pattern of enabling and entitlement. Meanwhile, my former family was facing the harsh consequences of their actions. Through mutual connections, I learned they had been forced to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable suburb, far from the prestigious downtown address they had briefly claimed as their own. The children had to switch school enrollment plans at the last minute, creating confusion and disruption. Troy, who had been between jobs, was forced to take a position at significantly lower pay than his previous role just to secure housing. Heather reluctantly applied for retail work after years of being supported by my parents and occasional artistic commissions that never amounted to much income. Most significantly, my parents had to dip into their retirement savings to help Heather and Troy with the security deposit and first month's rent on their new apartment. The financial cushion they had counted on for their golden years was being steadily depleted by their continued support of my sister's family. Though I maintained my distance, these developments triggered complex emotions. I felt vindicated but also saddened by the collateral damage, particularly for my niece and nephew who were innocent parties in their parents' schemes. I began weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Gabriela Martinez, a specialist in family estrangement and boundary setting. Our conversations helped me process the mixture of relief, grief, and lingering guilt I experienced. "What you're describing is the grief of losing the family you wished you had, not the family that actually exists," Dr. Martinez explained during one session. "You're mourning the relationship that should have been possible between supportive parents and siblings who respect each other." These sessions became crucial as I navigated my new reality, a life without the family connections that, however flawed, had been a constant presence. I began developing new traditions and support networks, strengthening friendships that had sometimes taken a back seat to family obligations. Through journal writing, another therapeutic recommendation, I documented my emotional journey. Early entries were raw with anger and betrayal, but gradually evolved toward understanding and even compassion for my family's limitations while maintaining firm boundaries against their manipulative behaviors. 3 months after the incident, I received my first direct contact from my father, an email with the subject line, "We need to talk." The message contained no apology, only justifications and guilt. We were only trying to help Heather, as any parents would. "You've always had advantages she didn't." Your reaction was completely disproportionate to a simple misunderstanding about temporary housing. After consulting with Dr. Martinez, I crafted a brief, factual response. "There was no misunderstanding. I have audio recordings of your plans to gradually move me out of my own property. I'm open to conversation when you're ready to acknowledge what actually happened." My mother's attempt came a week later, a tearful voicemail that veered between accusations and pleas for reconciliation, but similarly lacked any real accountability. "Families make mistakes, Arlo. We never meant to hurt you. The children miss their uncle. How can you be so cold?" Most manipulative was Heather's message, which arrived as a greeting card with photos of Emma and Liam looking sad. "Your niece and nephew don't understand why Uncle Arlo disappeared. They ask about you every day. How do I explain that family doesn't matter to you?" These attempts to re-establish contact without acknowledgement of wrongdoing only strengthened my resolve to maintain boundaries. I didn't respond to either my mother or Heather, understanding that engagement without fundamental changes would only restart the cycle of manipulation. Despite the emotional turbulence, I found myself sleeping better, focusing more clearly at work, and experiencing fewer of the tension headaches that had plagued me for years during family interactions. The physical manifestations of stress I had normalized were gradually fading, revealing how toxic the relationship had truly been. As spring approached, I began to feel a strange sense of gratitude for the Christmas betrayal. It had forced me to confront patterns I might otherwise have tolerated indefinitely. Though the catalyst was painful, the outcome was a clearer understanding of my worth and my right to protect it. A valuable lesson, however difficult its delivery. 6 months after the Christmas incident, I was settled in a new high-rise apartment with panoramic views of Elliott Bay. Unlike my previous condo, which I had chosen partly with family visits in mind, this space was selected solely for my preferences: an open floor plan, home office with built-in bookshelves, and a location walking distance from my favorite jazz club. The proceeds from selling my condo had allowed me to make this upgrade while still adding substantially to my investment portfolio. Financially, cutting ties with my perpetually needy family had unexpected benefits. No more emergency loans to my sister, no more subsidizing family gatherings, no more guilt-induced gifts. My career trajectory shifted upward as well. Without the emotional drain of family drama, I channeled more energy into work, leading a successful project that earned recognition from senior management. By summer, I received a substantial promotion that came with both a generous raise and more creative control over my team's direction. "You seem different," my colleague Jasmine remarked during a team celebration. "More confident, less apologetic. Whatever changes you've made in your life, they're working for you." She wasn't the only one to notice the transformation. Friends commented on my lighter mood, improved posture, even a more relaxed speaking voice. The hypervigilance that had developed from years of navigating family landmines was gradually subsiding, allowing my authentic self more room to emerge. I developed new friendships through a hiking group and a cooking class, connections based on shared interests rather than obligation. These relationships had a different quality: mutual respect, clear boundaries, and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. For the first time, I celebrated my birthday exactly as I wanted: a small dinner with close friends followed by live music, without accommodating family expectations or dealing with my sister's inevitable drama stealing focus. I found myself laughing more freely, speaking more honestly, and feeling more present in my own life. My physical health improved dramatically as well. The stress eating that had become habitual during family interactions gave way to more mindful nutrition. Regular hiking replaced the nervous energy that had previously kept me up at night. I lost 15 pounds without specifically trying, simply as a byproduct of reduced stress. Sleep, which had always been elusive around family visits, became deeper and more restorative. The chronic neck tension that had plagued me for years, which my doctor had directly attributed to stress, gradually dissolved with a combination of improved sleep, regular exercise, and the absence of triggering interactions. To process the ongoing complexity of family estrangement, I joined a support group for adults who had created healthy distance from toxic family dynamics. The group provided perspective and validation that even my therapist, however skilled, couldn't offer the understanding that comes only from shared experience. The hardest part, shared Michael, a fellow group member, is the constant societal message that family trumps everything, including your own well-being. People who haven't lived it can't understand why distance is sometimes the only healthy choice. This community helped me navigate difficult milestones: my parents' anniversary, family-centered holidays, the occasional waves of grief for relationships that could have been different. They understood the complex emotions of relief, intertwined with loss, freedom coupled with occasional loneliness. When autumn approached, I created new traditions to replace family-centered holidays. For Thanksgiving, I organized a chosen family feast with friends in similar situations. For Christmas, I booked a solo trip to Hawaii, replacing painful associations with new memories of sunrise hikes and sunset swims. 6 months into my family estrangement, I experienced the first direct encounter with my past. While selecting produce at a farmer's market across town, I looked up to find myself face to face with Heather. She was thinner than I remembered, the designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweatshirt, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail rather than her usual elaborate style. For a moment, we both froze, shopping baskets in hand amid the bustling Saturday crowd. Her expression cycled rapidly through shock, calculation, and an attempt at casual warmth. "Arlo," she said, stepping closer. "What a surprise." I nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. "Heather, you look good," she offered, eyes assessing my appearance for clues about my life. "We've been worried about you." "I'm doing well," I replied simply, not offering the details she was clearly fishing for. An awkward silence stretched between us before she launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech. "You know, what happened was a big misunderstanding. We never intended to." I raised my hand, gently but firmly interrupting. "I heard the conversations, Heather. All of them. There was no misunderstanding." Her face flushed. "We're family, Arlo. Families forgive. Sometimes boundaries are more important than forgiveness," I replied. "I hope things are working out for you and the kids." I moved to step around her, but she caught my arm. "Mom and Dad are really struggling with this. They're getting older. Do you really want to waste the time you have left with them?" The emotional manipulation was so familiar it almost made me laugh. Instead, I carefully removed her hand from my arm. "That's their choice. They know what would need to happen for me to consider rebuilding a relationship." "An apology?" she scoffed. "For trying to help your family? For attempting to take something that wasn't offered?" I corrected calmly. "I need to finish my shopping. Take care, Heather." As I walked away, my heart pounded and my hands trembled slightly, but my voice had remained steady. In the car afterward, I sat for several minutes, processing the encounter. Despite the physical symptoms of anxiety, I felt proud of maintaining my boundaries without cruelty or unnecessary conflict. Later that week, I received an unexpected letter, addressed to my work, the one address my family still knew. The envelope bore the letterhead of Greenwood Elementary School. Inside was a note from Miss Playson, from my end. Winters, a school counselor. "Dear Mr. Hamilton, I'm writing with your niece Emma's permission. During our sessions, she has expressed missing her uncle, you, and confusion about your absence from family gatherings. While I understand family situations are complex, I wanted to reach out as Emma's advocate to see if some form of connection might be possible that respects everyone's boundaries. Please contact me if you'd like to discuss options." The letter created an ethical dilemma I hadn't anticipated. My issues were with the adults in my family, not the children who were innocent bystanders to the dysfunction. Yet maintaining boundaries with my sister and parents, while having a relationship with the children, seemed practically impossible. After considerable thought and consultation with my therapist, I developed an indirect approach. Working with my attorney, I established an education fund for both Emma and Liam, structured so the money could only be used for educational expenses paid directly to institutions. My sister and brother-in-law would have no access to the funds themselves. Additionally, I arranged to send birthday and Christmas gifts through a third party, my Aunt Catherine, who understood the situation and agreed to help maintain this limited connection without pressuring me for broader family reconciliation. These measures allowed me to support my niece and nephew's future without reopening the door to the manipulation and boundary violations that had necessitated the estrangement in the first place. As the one-year anniversary of the Christmas incident approached, my professional life reached a new milestone. The project I'd led was featured in a major industry publication, with my name prominently mentioned as the innovative force behind its success. The article included a professional photo and brief profile highlighting my career trajectory. Within days of publication, the contact attempts from my family resumed with renewed intensity. My father sent an email congratulating me on the recognition, transparently using it as an opening to re-establish communication. My mother called my office directly, something she had never done before, leaving a message with my assistant about how proud she was of her son, the technology innovator. Most telling was Heather's approach, a public comment on the online version of the article. "So proud of my talented brother. Family has always been his biggest support." The irony was almost comical. Their renewed interest coincided precisely with my public recognition, reinforcing my understanding of the transactional nature of their concept of family. Success, it seemed, made me worth acknowledging again. I didn't respond to any of these overtures, recognizing them for what they were: not genuine attempts at reconciliation, but efforts to associate themselves with my success after having tried to exploit me for years. Instead, I focused on building upon this professional momentum, accepting speaking engagements and mentoring opportunities that would have been impossible to manage while juggling family demands. My world expanded in their absence, filling with meaningful connections and accomplishments that were valued for their own sake, not for what could be extracted from them. As winter approached again, I found myself reflecting on the tremendous changes a single year had brought. The painful catalyst of betrayal had cleared the way for unprecedented growth and authentic living. While I wouldn't have chosen the path of family estrangement, the destination it led to was healthier than I could have imagined. Exactly 1 year after the Christmas that changed everything, I sat in the window seat of my new apartment, watching snow fall gently over the Seattle skyline. The city lights twinkled through the flurries, a peaceful backdrop for reflection on how dramatically my life had transformed. A year ago, I had been preparing my condo for a family visit that would become the breaking point in decades of unhealthy dynamics. Today, I was preparing to host a small gathering of friends who genuinely celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges without keeping score. The contrast between my emotional state then versus now was striking. Last December, despite my outward success, I had been chronically anxious, perpetually seeking approval from people who saw me primarily as a resource to be used. I had mistaken obligation for love, sacrifice for connection. Now, despite the pain of family estrangement, I felt a profound sense of peace. The constant background hum of anxiety had quieted. The reflexive guilt that accompanied any act of self-care had faded. The emotional hypervigilance, always watching for signs of disapproval or manipulation, had given way to a more relaxed presence in my own life. I had come to understand my parents' flawed perspective without accepting responsibility for it. Their generation viewed family as a hierarchical structure where children eternally owed their parents, regardless of how those parents behaved. My father's authoritarian approach and my mother's emotional manipulation weren't personal failures, but learned behaviors from their own upbringings. Similarly, I developed compassion for Heather's limitations while maintaining firm boundaries. As the golden child, she had been raised to expect accommodation and special treatment. Her identity had formed around being the family favorite, making her genuinely incapable of recognizing her own entitlement. The system had damaged her as surely as it had damaged me, just in different ways. This understanding didn't excuse their behavior or necessitate reconciliation, but it freed me from the bitterness that might otherwise have clouded my new beginning. I could acknowledge the human frailty behind their actions while protecting myself from its consequences. In the months following the Christmas incident, my anger had gradually transformed into something more nuanced. The white-hot rage at their betrayal cooled into a steady resolve to create healthier patterns in all my relationships. I learned to recognize the early warning signs of boundary violations, the subtle guilt trips, the unstated expectations, the indirect requests that carried implied obligations. These patterns appeared not just in family dynamics but in certain friendships and work relationships as well. With this awareness came a new ability to address boundary issues early, clearly, and calmly. "I'm not comfortable with that" became a phrase I could deliver without apologetic qualifiers or defensive explanations. "That doesn't work for me" became a complete sentence, not the opening of a negotiation. This growth extended to my ability to trust my own perceptions. Years of subtle gaslighting, being told my memory was wrong, my feelings were overreactions, my boundaries were selfish, had eroded confidence in my own experience. Rebuilding that trust required conscious effort to validate my instincts rather than doubting them. I developed a new definition of family based on respect rather than DNA. The people who earned places in my inner circle demonstrated care through actions, not declarations. They respected no as a complete answer. They celebrated my successes without immediately looking for how they might benefit. They offered support without keeping ledgers of reciprocation. Perhaps most significantly, I came to understand forgiveness as something I did for myself, not as a transaction that required restoring relationships. I could forgive my family for being unable to provide what I needed without putting myself back in position for continued harm. Forgiveness became about releasing my own anger, not about giving them another opportunity to exploit my hope for change. 9 months into my new life, I agreed to a carefully controlled meeting with my parents. We met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe midway between our homes. I arrived early, selecting a table with clear sightlines to the exit, a small but significant act of self-protection. When they entered, I was struck by how much they had aged in the months since I'd seen them. My father's confident stride had diminished to a careful walk. My mother's hair showed more gray than I remembered. For a brief moment, I felt the pull of filial obligation, the programming that insisted I was responsible for their well-being regardless of how they had treated mine. The meeting began with what seemed like genuine contrition. "We've had a lot of time to think," my father said. "We realize we crossed a line." My mother added tearfully, "We never meant to hurt you, Arlo. We just wanted to help Heather and the kids." For a moment, I allowed myself to hope this might be the beginning of real change. But as the conversation continued, subtle blame began seeping in. Comments about my overreaction to a misunderstanding. Suggestions that I could have handled things differently. References to how devastated everyone had been by my extreme response. Most telling was my father's statement. "Families sometimes make mistakes, but real family forgives and moves on." The underlying message was clear. I was expected to reset boundaries that had been violated, rather than expecting those boundaries to be respected. I maintained calm throughout the interaction, neither accepting blame nor escalating conflict. When my mother suggested a family dinner to put this behind us, I responded with clear conditions for moving forward. "I'm open to rebuilding our relationship," I explained, "but that would require acknowledgement of what actually happened. Not a misunderstanding, but a deliberate plan to take advantage of me. It would also require respect for my boundaries going forward, including my relationship with Heather and Troy." My father's expression hardened at these terms. "You're still being unreasonable. Family supports each other unconditionally. Support shouldn't be one-directional, I replied, and it shouldn't require sacrificing my own well-being. The meeting ended without resolution, but with important clarity. Despite months of reflection, my parents remained committed to a family dynamic that prioritized Heather's needs above all else. They wanted reconciliation not because they recognized the damage done, but because my absence disrupted the system they had created. I walked away without anger, but with renewed conviction that my decision to maintain distance was necessary for my health and growth. Some relationships cannot be transformed, only accepted for what they are, and sometimes what they are is too harmful to maintain. The most unexpected aspect of this difficult journey was the sense of gratitude that eventually emerged. Not gratitude for the betrayal itself, but for what it revealed and what it made possible. Without that catalytic Christmas confrontation, I might have continued indefinitely in patterns of obligation and resentment, never experiencing the freedom and authenticity I now enjoyed. The very painfulness of the experience had forced growth that might otherwise have taken decades or never occurred at all. I discovered strength. I hadn't known I possessed the ability to stand alone when necessary, to rebuild after significant loss, to trust my own judgment, even when others questioned it. These capacities had always existed within me, but had been suppressed by family dynamics that benefited from my compliance and self-doubt. The relationships I developed after the estrangement had a different quality than any I had known before, deeper, more authentic, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. I learned to identify people who valued boundaries and reciprocity, who could disagree without manipulation, who supported without expectation. Perhaps most valuable was the freedom to define success on my own terms, without the constant background pressure to prove my worth through achievement or to compensate for perceived family shortcomings. I could pursue goals that genuinely mattered to me rather than those that might finally earn parental approval or sibling respect. As I look back on this transformative year, I realize that family estrangement is often portrayed as a failure or tragedy, when sometimes it's the healthiest possible response to chronic boundary violations. The true tragedy would have been continuing to participate in dynamics that diminished everyone involved, enabling patterns that prevented growth and authenticity. For anyone watching who recognizes their own family in this story, please know that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-preservation that ultimately benefits everyone, even those who initially resist it. You aren't responsible for maintaining relationships that consistently harm your well-being. Sometimes the most compassionate choice is to step away and allow natural consequences to create possibility for change. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your boundaries? What signs helped you recognize when a relationship was becoming unhealthy? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else recognize patterns they've been unable to name. And if you found value in my journey, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear that prioritizing their well-being isn't selfish, but necessary. Thank you for listening. And remember, family should be built on mutual respect, not obligation. Until next time, take care of yourselves.